Hi, I'm Joe and welcome to the channel. In this series of videos, we've been exploring how to use the minor pentatonic scale to solo. And in the first three videos, we looked at each individual note of that scale over a specific chord that falls in a typical blues chord progression. In this video, we're going to make sure that we understand when the chord changes happen. This is a very important thing to do because you want to make sure that you're hitting the right notes, the target notes if you will, in a solo. So to know that, you have to make sure that you're also doing active listening while you're soloing and you're hearing the chord progression going behind you. So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to take a look at doing that in a very simple way at first. Nothing too complex. We're just going to make sure that we're hitting the root notes of each of the chord changes. And I'm going to show you kind of a powerful concept that I kind of call exhausting all possibilities. And what I mean by that is, if you think about it, if we're just going to play one note just to play the root note in the chord progression, well, that could be kind of boring, right? Well, let's go ahead and explore different ways we can play certain notes to give it a different character when we want to. Let's go ahead and grab a guitar and get started. All right, so the first thing what we're going to do is some active listening. We're going to go ahead and listen to this blues chord progression in the key of G. Obviously, it's important to know what key that you're playing in and to know the chords that you're playing. And in this case here, since we know it's in the typical blues context, we know we're going to play like a G7 to a C7 to a D7. So let's go ahead though and listen to see how many bars, which means how many measures, those chords happen. Let's get a listen. G, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4. So there's 4 bars of G, C, 2 bars of C, back to the G for 2 bars, D, C, G, and a D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I heard there, I heard that the G for the first part of it is going to play 4 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3. To the C7 for 2, 3, for 2 bars, 2, 3. Back to the G7 for 2 bars. To the D7 for 1 bar. Back to the C7 for 1 bar. To the G7 for 1 bar, and then D7 again for 1 bar. So if you have to, get a piece of paper down, go ahead and write that chord progression down. So now that we know exactly when the chords change. Because the interesting thing is when we start learning patterns and solos, especially the blues pentatonic box, it's a lot of times we're just going up and down the scale, but we're not listening to the background and what's happening when the chords change. And it's always important to know exactly where you are at all times in a song. And again, this is a concept that's very important, not just for the blues, but for any type of style of music that you want to play, any type of soloing that you want to do, or even just when you're playing rhythm parts in general. It's nice to know exactly where you are in the music. Okay, so we've done that. We now know also then the chords, right? We know the G, C, and D. So let's go ahead and just do a simple exercise of targeting those roots every time the chord changes, just to make sure that we know when they're going to happen. So we're going to start with the G. Go to C. We know back to the G. To the D. C. D. And just so it's not so boring, what's nice to do is just start jumping around different octaves of those notes. That's also important to do because then you'll know in each position where those roots fall. So let's say you're soloing and you're changing and shifting positions, you know exactly where the home bases are of all of these chords because you've practiced jumping around. I'll give an example of that. Let's start over again. G. Jumping everywhere. that's one thing you can do, just start jumping all around. Just again, get familiar with where the roots notes fall all over the fretboard. So you can see here what I'm trying to do is I'm maximizing your practice time. We're actually practicing two things there, right? We're listening to the chord progression changes, and then we're also learning where each of the root notes of the chords are all over the fretboard. So let's do some more maximization of that. Is that a word? I'm not sure. But let's go ahead and use more time in our practice schedule to maximize what we're trying to learn here. So what's an interesting thing to do is playing these root notes obviously can be kind of sound boring, right? Because you're just kind of making sure you know where you are. Well, let's go ahead and explore how we can do different things with the root notes, okay? And let's do this without the music for a second here. If you think about it, let's just say we're gonna play G, the G, right, for the first chord. Well, I can hit that note flat, right? I can add vibrato to it. I can add wild vibrato. I can rake into it. I can approach it from the half step below, which is the flat 7 to 1. I can slide up from that. I can even do from the flat 3 back down. Same thing, or I can slide. And again, I also have always at your disposal vibrato, which is adding different texture to it, right? This is what I kind of like to call exhausting all possibilities. When you play a note, think of all the different ways you can get to that note and different ways you can articulate that note. We can play it quiet, right? We can play with our fingers. We can hammer on. We can pull off to it. We can do that loud, we can do it quiet. There's so many different ways just to play one note, and that's the beauty of the guitar. It's so much of an expressive instrument that you can do anything you want. Well, go ahead while you're practicing where the roots are and you're listening to the chord progression, find out different ways to get to those root notes, how to articulate them differently, adding different vibrato. I forgot too, we can even bend into these now, right? So you can bend into the notes, you can do whatever you want. And try that with each root note as well, right? So we can go from flat 7 to the root for the G. We can do the same thing for the C. Even for the D, approaching it from the flat 7, which would be the C to a D. So watch this. I'm going to play that whole chord progression, but just with these notes. So just by doing that alone, you heard where the chord progression changes happen, and I'm just playing 2 notes per chord, basically, just approaching it from the flat 7 for each of those. So let's go ahead now and apply that concept to playing just the root notes when the chord changes happen, but find different and interesting ways to express yourself. And another thing to do too, while we're at it, is you don't always have to come in on the 1. You know, give the music a little time to breathe first and then come in. So now, not only are you practicing listening to the music, understanding the roots are all over the fretboard, understanding we have different possibilities to play the notes, but we're also learning phrasing because we're learning when to come in at certain times during the beat. So again, maximizing your practice time is essential. So I know this sounds like a kind of a silly concept at first, just playing the root notes of a blues chord progression, but you can get so much mileage out of this, and you're starting to train your brain for when those chord changes happen, where on the fretboard to play those, how to articulate those notes, and also starting to get a little bit into phrasing. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, so you saw there I was just experimenting, hitting the root notes, but in different ways. I was sliding into some, I was hammering on. Again, you could do bends, you could do whatever you want to get into these notes, but just make sure that you're landing when the chord changes are happening at first. Again, this is just a great exercise to get you familiar with playing over a typical blues chord progression. And you can apply this concept again to any style of music whatsoever. So some practice advice for this one. Go ahead and take this track, you can download it for free off of my website, and use it as kind of a template, or build your own track of music. It could be anything, it could be the blues, it could be anything that you want, and make sure that you're outlining all the chord changes. And if you need to, have that piece of paper in front of you, that chart that you made when the chord changes happen. And at first, just sit and listen to the track. Listen to when those changes happen. Then, start practicing by targeting the root notes of the chord changes while you're playing along to the music. Then, again, exhaust all possibilities. Find ways to get into those root notes, into different styles, different ways to articulate those notes, different techniques. Everything at your disposal. You can even use dynamics, playing softly those notes, playing loudly, sliding again into them. You can pull off, hammer on. There's so many different ways to express yourself on the instrument, and go ahead and explore those. And you might even come up with cool little lines, and you can start then tying things together. And then when you're feeling more adventurous, add more notes, but make sure that you target and land on the root notes. So maybe approach by 2 or 3 notes, getting up and climbing your way up to the root note of when the chord changes happen. At any rate, just go ahead and have fun and explore. A lot of times, sometimes we're given a pattern and we're just playing aimlessly up and down them, but we're not, again, taking time to listen to how each note fits over the chords, and we're not exhausting all possibility to see how we can express ourselves on the instrument. So go ahead and take your time and do that. I hope you found some value in this lesson, and if you did, I hope you'll consider supporting the channel for free by subscribing down below, hit the like button, and knock on the bell, and you'll be notified when the next video comes out. As always, I wish you a great day.